You're live.
Good evening. This is Matt DeFranti, Chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. Welcome to our November 7th, 2024 meeting. I'd like to note that we're starting the meeting at 7:01, not 7 o'clock, which was my goal, but 7:01. This is an all virtual meeting, and NVTC staff followed the procedures and guidelines in our electronic participation policy to give notice to the commission, staff, and the public. This meeting is simultaneously being broadcast to the public on YouTube. For those listening on YouTube, if the live stream transmission fails, please contact NVTC staff via email at support@novatransit.org, which will be monitored during the meeting. A few important reminders. Please mute your microphone when you are not speaking to help cut down on background noise. We do have a chat function available, but no public business can be conducted over chat, so please don't use the chat. Just request. Please keep your cameras on so you can be counted towards quorum. If you need to step away, just do a check to make sure everyone is there, but if you could come back quickly, that would be great. Before I ask, let's see, I'll ask our board administrator, Rhonda Gilchrist, to conduct the roll call for quorum purposes. She will also announce the staff who are participating virtually. Over to you, Rhonda. Please respond with here or present when your name is called. Go ahead, Rhonda.
You're DeFranti.
Here.
Mr. Geary.
Present.
Mr. Alcorn.
Here.
Ms. Bagley.
Here.
Mr. Bierman.
Here.
Mr. Eben.
Here.
Ms. Garvey. She's connecting. Ms. Garvey, are you there? Mr. Karantonis. Mr. Krizik.
Here.
Mr. Lopez. Ms. Palchik.
Here.
Mr. Reed.
Present.
Mr. Salim.
Here.
Mr. Sickles. Mr. Smedberg.
Present.
Mr. Snyder.
Here.
Mr. Stork. Mr.
Here.
Trogdon. Mr. Trogdon.
Here. Sorry, I'm on mute. Here.
That's okay. Mr. Walkinshaw.
Here.
And I see Miss Garvey
Yep,
arrived.
I'm here and I had to update. It could be that Takis has to do the same thing. I know he's trying to get in.
He's trying to get in.
Yeah.
But he's not in yet. Okay, we do have quorum. I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Rhonda. We also have, I hope you heard, Mr. Stork said he's here as well. I'll take a minute just to start this evening by mentioning what we all have been thinking about over the last 48 hours, which was we had a major election, presidential election. If you could, yeah, if you can go ahead and mute, and I'll just offer the thought that as we are all public servants, it's an important election, and we, in this capacity, are working on transportation issues. The residents that we serve need public transportation, and we are facing a challenge over the next 4 years with respect to reason and with respect to public service, in my view. I'm mindful that we will continue that work, and civility is key, and also we need to rise above provincialism and some aspects, of course, of partisanship. It is also the case that our residents are frontline workers, and our residents who need Metro often don't have the resources at times for other means of transportation, and they must have public transportation working. So we will face emotional challenges as leaders with respect to this election, and we will also have to use our analytical skills and our reasoning skills to reach the leadership that our residents desperately are going to need over the coming 4 years. Kate will speak later in the meeting to the challenges, but I thought it would be important to at least speak some of my own thoughts, and hopefully they're ones that you share and find within reason. We're in a difficult moment as a country. We need to step forward as leaders to find the best in ourselves for the residents who desperately need, are going to need the transportation services that are at the heart of this commission, but also generally caring for those like those on this call who are worried about our immigrant communities, respect for and some of the issues that were at play in this election that uniquely, perhaps uniquely impact women and some of the other issues that are clear. So I'll stop with that, but I do think it's important to at least mark the challenge that we face before us. So moving on to perhaps a slightly more positive or optimistic note, I'd like to congratulate Senator Adam Ebbin and Delegate Mark Sickles. They received the Northern Virginia Transportation Alliance's 2024 Legislative Advocacy Award for their work on transportation issues in the region. I was honored to be there and get to offer a few minutes as in the role of chair of thoughts on transportation. And it was just a great moment to get to be part of a room that was recognizing Senator Ebbin and Delegate Sickles for their work in this past session, but for their work over a number of years. And I believe the two of you both entered the legislature in the same year. The Alliance presented their awards a few weeks back, and it was great to be here. So as we do each month, now moving efficiently, I will make one logistical note. When we're virtual, and I'm thrilled that we're virtual in this case, because it's been a busy last week and 72 hours. Thrilled that we're virtual, but as we do each month, when we're virtual, we will go through a roll call. So if you can anticipate and be ready for when you're going to have to respond to Rhonda's, Ms. Gilchrist's comments, that would be great. We will try to be efficient. As always, we all have families that we're eager to get to. Written public comments is our next topic. As we do each month, NVTC continues to seek general public comments. Kate, did we get any public comments this month?
We did not get any public comments this month. And just as a reminder to all commissioners, next month is actually our public hearing. So we may have more public comments in the general sense coming in next month's meeting.
Thank you, Kate. So we will now move to agenda item 2, which is action to approve the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 3rd, 2024 meeting?
So moved.
So moved, it's Libby.
Second.
Great. So we have Ms. Palchek who did the moving. In this case, we had Ms. Garvey will be the second, if that's okay with everybody involved. Any further discussion on the minutes? Throw up your virtual hand or your hand on the camera, and I'll try and recognize you. If so, in this case, we hear none. The board administrator, Ms. Gilchrist, will now call the roll for the vote. Please respond with a yay, nay, or abstain if that's what you prefer. Ms. Gilchrist.
Chair DeFrenti,
Yes.
Mr. Gary,
Aye.
Mr. Elkhorn,
Aye.
Ms. Bagley,
Aye.
Mr. Bierman,
Aye.
Mr. Ebbin,
Aye.
Ms. Garvey,
Yes, aye.
Mr. Karantonis,
Aye.
Mr. Lopez, Ms. Palchek,
Aye.
Mr. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Salim.
Aye.
Oh, I forgot Mr. Krizik. I'm sorry.
Aye.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Mr. Smedberg,
Aye.
Mr. Snyder,
Aye.
Mr. Stork. Mr. Stork, you're muted.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
The vote passes. The motion passes. I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you. Action item number 3 is the next consent agenda. It includes 2 items. 3A, approve the 2025 NVTC meeting schedule and authorize the executive director to issue an RFP for creative services. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
So that is Mr. Alcorn, and who seconded it?
Salim.
Senator Salim, thank you. Now we'll turn it back to Ms. Gilchrist for our roll call votes on the consent. Wait, any discussion of the consent agenda items? Kate has been working quite detailed on the meeting schedule and the RFP for creative services. I see Mr. Snyder. Did you have a comment? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just for the record, I wonder if Kate could review what we mean by creative services, just so there's no misunderstanding of what that means. Thanks.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair, Mr. Snyder. Creative services is that's support to do our publications and graphic design that we cannot do in-house. So any of the materials that you see that are printed when we do reports for the General Assembly, et cetera, those are done through a firm. And the firm that we've had for 3 years. So this is time to go out and competitively procure a firm again.
So it's part of our outreach to the general public as well as policy.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Snyder, and providing us context. Ms. Matthijs, seeing no other comments, we will we'll now call the roll for the vote. I think we did a motion and second, so now call the roll. Over to you, Ms. Gilchrist.
Chair DeFerenti,
Yes.
Mr. Gary,
Yes.
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Ms. Bagley,
Aye.
Mr. Bierman. You're muted. There you go. Mr. Eben,
Aye.
Ms. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Karantonis,
Aye.
Mr. Krizik,
Aye.
Mr. Lopez is not here, Ms. Palchuk,
Aye.
Mr. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Salim,
Aye.
Mr. Sickles is not here, Mr. Smedberg,
Aye.
Mr. Snyder,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
and Mr. Walkinshaw. And I forgot Miss Reed. Sorry. I'm having all
Hello.
sorts of problems. Sorry
Aye.
about that.
No
Hi.
worries.
And did I hear from Mr. Walkinshaw?
Aye. Walkinshaw, aye.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Gilchrist. Now we'll turn to item 4, which is our WMATA report. We have one WMATA board member, Mr. Paul Smedberg, here tonight to give the report. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everyone, earlier today, Metro's Finance and Capital Committee and Safety and Operations Committee met and reviewed 2 key initiatives that will come to the board for action later this month. First is the restructured Metrobus and Metrorail operating subsidy allocation formulas and the Better Bus 2025 network redesign. First, let me make a few points on the proposed operating subsidy formulas. It is a complex topic, as you can imagine, but one that Metro staff had taken on with a great deal of input from the board, NBTC, and our funding partners and our local jurisdictions in Virginia. This is the first true overhaul of the subsidy allocation formulas since the late 1970s for rail and 1990s for the bus. With these new restructured formulas, we will see a number of benefits that address some longstanding issues, specifically increased transparency, better alignment between benefits and costs, incentives for jurisdictions to encourage paid ridership, and improved fiscal predictability for funding jurisdictions. As far as potential fiscal impacts, WMATA staff presented how the restructured formulas would change overall subsidy contributions after the approval of the 2025 Better Bus Network, which redistributes service across the region. Virginia's overall share of subsidy would decrease by just under $6 million, while Maryland and the District of Columbia would see marginal increases. Next, the approval of the 2025 Better Bus Network redesign follows over 2 years of extensive planning and engagement in order to modernize Metro's bus network. Once implemented, the Better Bus Network could attract 13,000 more daily weekday trips with existing resource levels. Metro received over 13,000 comments this summer and made changes to more than half of the proposed routes as a result of the public's feedback. For those interested, there are numerous resources available online at wmata.com/betterbus. Once the board approves the 2025 network in a couple weeks, Metro staff will immediately begin working closely with jurisdictional staff on the various implementation steps between now and next summer. And there's one thing I think I want to note here. Metro staff did talk to several jurisdictions across the country who went through similar exercises. And the one thing that all of them advised WMATA to do was immediately start thinking about implementation in some form. So there's a whole team already established that is going to be implementing this, once this is approved. And they've already been thinking about how this would roll out. In your materials, you find recaps of 2 October briefings to the board, which covered our capital and operating outlooks. I won't go over them all in detail here, but we'll note that there are some long-term state of good repair challenges based on current levels of funding. Thanks to the additional investments from Virginia for fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 26, we do not see any significant operating funding challenges until fiscal year 27. Looking ahead, the Metro Board will have a discussion on the fiscal year 26 operating and capital budgets on November 21st before the General Manager presents his fiscal year 26 proposed budget in December. And that completes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smedberg. I will open, I really appreciate the materials shared in advance, as well as your report summarizing a number of key steps that have been taken. I know that I will want to dig a little bit more deeply into the formulas, but I also broadly appreciate the efforts at transparency. I guess I'll just open the floor to folks if you have questions regarding Mr. Smedberg's report and the WMATA materials in your packets.
Mr. Chair, if I could, before
Sure.
You call on someone, the work on the new subsidy formulas, there was a lot of engagement with the jurisdictions and the funding partners. So just, this was not done in a vacuum, just with the board and, a few people. There was extensive engagement with a lot of people on this.
Great, thank you. And I that's what I anticipated with our 2 staff just saying that they had engaged. I have not done the detailed work, and I also don't know that in every instance, if there's been good reports from our staff, that helps others jurisdictions, I'm sure, feel the same. So, Ms. Palchik.
Thank you. And not a question, really just a comment. How pleased I was to see the Better Bus redesign. It absolutely seems much more straightforward, focused on connectivity, activity centers, and being that regional network that we absolutely need. And just to add on, I was meeting with one of our regional industry people from the private sector, and that was the first thing he said is we just need to get better at having that connectivity and improving our network. So this seems like an excellent step forward, and just very much appreciate the work that was done in the outreach and listening to the community. Some of the feedback that was listened to specifically. I know East Falls Church was a concern on the F20 network, and just want to thank the staff and everyone who worked on this.
Yeah, the point you made, Ms. Palchik, that was the goal, obviously, the connectivity. And staff really did listen. There was slightly over 13,000 comments that came in. They did make changes to half of what they had proposed. So, yeah.
And to say, I did not comment on wanting to keep the bus route going next to my office, but I appreciate that was kept in there. So thank you.
Good for you for not commenting, but still appreciating. I do see, is there anyone else who wanted to comment Mr. Karantonis, I see your microphone is unmuted. Did you have a comment?
Oh, that was a vestigial unmute. I could align myself with Commissioner Palchik's comments. I want to specifically say the public input process that precedes all this was one for the books. Really very good, very, very well done. And here we see for everybody else, when we listen to those who need transit, we get better transit, right? So that's great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, both these initiatives were really significant efforts, very complex, and we're really thinking about the future, particularly on the formula side. This is really significant and hopefully a formula that we'll be able to use now and into the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Smedberg and Mr. Karantonis. And I also, some of the listening I particularly appreciated was I did some work into one route that look into one route and just listening does not mean always agreeing with input. And I really felt like the detailed thinking there and the explanation was great from Metro staff. So thanks very much.
And Mr. Chair, there, again, I mentioned with the formula, there was a lot of engagement with staff. There was equal amount of engagement with jurisdictional staff on the bus redesign as well, and others. And want to point out, Adam and Andrew and the work in both those areas.
Thank you for recognizing. Absolutely, thank you for recognizing NVTC staff for their role. And so with that, we will move on. Not seeing any other comments, we'll move on to a related piece of this, which is a report from our committee chair, WMATA committee chair Walter Alcorn, and Legislative and Policy Committee chair Canik Aguirre. They'll lead us through this agenda item. I have to fit it in at some point. So I'll congratulate Mr. Aguirre for being reelected on Tuesday in this forum, even as we talked about it briefly in executive session. But over to Mr. Alcorn first.
Thank you very much, Chair De Ferrante. So we do have in our meeting materials the draft 2024 annual report on the performance and condition of WMATA. We're going to hear tonight from Adam Hager, who's NVTC's new WMATA program manager. He's going to provide a presentation on this year's draft report, and it is going to be coming back next month for action. So after Adam, we're going to hear from our executive director and new director of programs and policy, who are going to report back on the various work that NVTC is doing to support our efforts collectively to find a long-term, sustainable, dedicated funding solution for our region. So before I pass it over to Adam, also just a quick announcement. The WMATA committee and the Legislative Policy Committee, that's a joint committee, we're going to be meeting jointly on November 21st at 6 p.m. and it's going to be an all virtual meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Adam.
All right, thank you, Chair Alcorn. Tonight, we do have a brief presentation covering this year's report on the performance and condition of WMATA. On the next slide, you'll see that NVTC is required by state code to submit this report each year by December 15th. Staff has been working with the WMATA committee since the spring to develop this report, which advances many of the themes in last year's. Next slide, please. As far as the structure of the report, we have included a full draft report in your materials, so feel free to take a look if you'd like. There are 4 chapters to the report this year. The core policy content is in Chapter 2, where we have proposed 10 recommendations that I'll cover in just a moment. Chapters 3 and 4 address state code requirements to detail expenditures from WMATA's use of Virginia's dedicated capital funds and a series of data from the National Transit Database and WMATA's Service Excellence Report. Next slide, please. So moving now to our recommendations, I won't cover each one. Again, several are carryover items from last year's report, but there are some key recommendations that I'd like to highlight, including how they are advancing through the DMV moves and SJ28 processes as notated on the right side of this slide. So number 1, of course, is our topic of the day. We spell out the need for a long-term sustainable funding solution for WMATA. There are, of course, some challenges with their future operating and capital budgets. So again, we spell that out in our first recommendation here. The region, of course, collectively came up with a temporary solution that addressed WMATA's FY25 budget, but there does remain that need for a long-term sustainable solution. WMATA did present a long-term operating and capital outlook in October, so we have covered that in this report. Second is the need to preserve additional state aid and operating cap rebaselining contained in the state's biennium budget. As you might recall, the Commonwealth included just over $60 million in FY25 and $84.5 million in FY26 in additional state aid to help WMATA fulfill their operating budget shortfall. Another key recommendation is our third, which recommends establishing a revised operating assistance growth cap. In Virginia, of course, the 3% cap is suspended in the two-year state budget. So as the SJ28 process moves forward, we are recommending a hard look at whether the 3% cap is the right cost containment tool, especially as WMATA works on new subsidy allocation formulas this fall, as you just heard from Mr. Smedberg. Moving down, numbers 4 and 5 are pretty straightforward. We do want to continue to see ridership growth. For those who don't know, WMATA has seen now 43 consecutive months of year-over-year growth in their ridership as of October. And then, of course, we do want to see WMATA establish a reserve fund at the right time, just like every other major transit agency in the country. Next slide. So these, I won't cover each one. Again, several are carryovers from last year, but recommendations 7 and 8 are really two that are central to the DMV Moves effort, which has really worked to identify ways to coordinate technology and transit policies across the region, again, to benefit riders and find cost savings. This report also does include progress that WMATA has made on a handful of important priorities to MVTC, including fare evasion, cost savings measures, and the Better Bus Network. Next slide. We are asking for feedback through November 15th, which we'll use to develop a final report for review by the WMATA committee on November 21st, and then the commission's consideration and approval on December 5th. And once approved, we'll submit the report to the governor and General Assembly by the December 15th deadline. So I know that that is a brief presentation and report here. Again, the entire report is in the materials for everybody's review, but with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Adam, for the report, and I'll open the floor to see if there are any questions from commissioners. Keeping in mind that we're all probably a little fatigued, and also this is a draft that will come back to us next month. I will say, without trying to talk too much trash, that the graphics in this look like they may be, Andrew, what are we doing? I mean, these may be even better than what Andrew put together when he was on point. But over to Mr. Alcorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just very quickly, I want to compliment staff for including the crosswalk with which areas and items are being worked on in DMV Moves and SJ28. I think that's helpful for all of us. And there may be some areas of discussion in either of those initiatives, or maybe even something in one of our committees that needs to be added. This is an evolving document. It's something we do every year, obviously, according to state law, but it is an opportunity to both place more emphasis, but also visibility and discussion around some of these points that are being worked on multiple fronts. So great job, staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alcorn. Mr. Walkinshaw.
Thank you, and appreciate everyone's work on this. And I'll preface this with an apology that I missed the last joint legislative WMATA committee meeting, so I might have missed this. But in recommendation number 9 that says increase worker contributions to pensions and OPEB to reflect national averages. So I presume we have the data to demonstrate that the current contribution levels don't match national averages, because and I may be a little bit out of date in this, but my recollection is when that issue has been looked at in the past, that our levels of contribution to benefits are in line with other major transit systems in the nation. So I guess, and maybe this is just something that can come back or be shared with me or others if they're interested in. I guess I'd like to see those numbers demonstrating that WMATA is, I guess, below the national average seems to be the implication here. And then how are we defining national average? Is it the national average of all transit systems, or is it the national average of the couple of transit systems that are comparable to WMATA in the nation?
Thank you, Mr. Walkinshaw, for that question. I will point out that this is a recommendation that came out of the 2017 LaHood report, if you recall. So this is a carryover item that we've had for several reports now. And of course, WMATA did just in August execute a new CBA with Local 689. And so we are waiting to see that final executed contract. But I know that there were a series of updates in that CBA that may address some of these recommendations, again, that MVTC has had for a few years. But we can look into those questions, especially around national averages, and make sure that we get back to you and include any relevant information in the final report.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Good question. Mr. Walkinshaw. Yes, Mr. Smedberg.
Thank you. Mr. Walkinshaw, I believe it generally, when they look at that, it's generally in the category of comparators. So, it would usually be WMATA and, 9 or 10 others that are in that sort of cohort. But I can work with Adam and, we can get you that information.
Thank you, Mr. Smedberg. So it also seems wise. I don't know that it needs to be reflected in the notes, but I would recommend Mr. Hager and Mr. DeVetter and Ms. Matthijs that if you can try to engage with Mr. Walkinshaw earlier in the next month than later because of Thanksgiving, and an email to him to try and answer that question, I think would be super helpful. I will thank you again for the question, Mr. Walkinshaw. So I'll just suggest that if you all could take a look at the recommendations in terms of order, to see if you think that anything needs to be shifted based on Tuesday's results. We have some federal recommendations, and all of the recommendations seem reasonable to me, and you don't have to answer. It's not a question for now. I just want to make sure we check the box of, because our federal reality is likely to shift, that doesn't mean we should stop having the priorities, but if federal folks look at this in addition to the state, given that the administration has indicated some alignment with our future federal partners, there's a timing question, but if you could just take a look at that, I'd be grateful. So thank you. And with that, we'll try and keep us on schedule. I don't want to be filibustering. We'll go, I think it's next to Ms. Matthijs. Is that right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Indeed, we're going to just transition over to provide some updates on where we are with the work that is going on in SJ 28 and DMV moves. But first, I did want to mention, obviously, we just acknowledge Adam Hager is now managing our WMATA portfolio. And that is something that Andrew DeVetter had been doing. Andrew DeVetter is actually our new Director of Programs and Policy. He is replacing Alan Fye, who recently left NVTC to go work at the Federal Transit Administration on federal policy. So we now continue to have friends at the federal level back over there. And so Andrew has been with NVTC for 8 years, I think, many of you know, working very closely on the WMATA work. And so we're very excited for him to transition over and manage the portfolio of programs and policy within the commission. So Andrew's actually going to dive in and tell the diffuse, but I want to mention a little bit just about those staff moves and the promotion opportunities we've been able to provide people. So, Andrew.
Thank you, Kate. And as one of those new responsibilities, I am chair of the technical working group for the SJ28 process. And so for this agenda item, I'm just going to give a very brief verbal update and then hand it over to the subcommittees, the joint subcommittees chair, Senator Abbott. So the work of the subcommittee is incredibly important to coming up with long-term sustainable dedicated funding solutions. While DMV Moves is having larger regional conversations about customer experience on transit seamlessness and a regional funding framework, SJ28 is getting down to details on the Virginia part of this broader regional solution. Virginia has the most transit agencies of the region, and we have the most complicated funding and governance structure when compared to our peers across the river. And so using information collected in DMV Moves with, I think, very tight coordination with their staffs, SJ28 is currently developing an expanded menu of revenue options that can potentially be part of the solution and build upon prior work that NVTC did earlier this year and last year. The subcommittee's work in meetings this month and last month is intended to provide that expanded menu of up to 15 revenue sources at the NVTC, PRTC, and at the statewide level. So trying to really think broadly about potential solutions. The next and final meeting of the subcommittee of 2024 is next Tuesday. So that is November 12th at 10 a.m. and it is held in NVTC's first floor conference room. The technical work for the joint subcommittee primarily rests on NVTC staff and other members of the technical working group. Given our capacity constraints, once the subcommittee finalizes that expanded menu to look at next week, NVTC staff are seeking additional consultant resources. So a later agenda item right after this one is to authorize the NVTC executive director to request proposals and take action on them to help support that effort. So NVTC staff are looking for consultant support that would help with generating those revenue estimates, which is a very technical exercise, as well as additional research and or related tasks that can help support the effort. The funding for that work is already included in NVTC's budget and is also being supported by additional contributions from VRE and PRTC. NVTC staff will use the DRPT General Planning Contract, which was competitively procured, to request for those proposals for technical support. Using this approach allows us for a timelier acquisition of consultants, which is very important considering the compressed and fast timeline that the effort is under next year. So before we move to that agenda item, I do want to offer SJ28 Joint Subcommittee Chair Senator Evan an opportunity to provide any comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. And I want to thank Andrew, Adam, and in absentia, Alan, and everyone who's been affiliated with the technical working group, giving us such good support and information as we work to build our menu at the next meeting. We've had a pretty busy year of the joint subcommittee, and as we approach our meeting next week, which I guess is our last of 2024, we've got important work to do in finalizing the list of revenue options so the staff can then develop some estimates. Because of meeting timing, I don't have a significant update for the commission tonight, but after our fourth meeting next week, I'll use our December commission meeting to brief the commissioners on the joint subcommittee's work plan for 2025 and the path ahead. So unless there are any questions, that's my report.
Thank you, Senator Evan. And thank you for your leadership of this group, both to get SJ28 as well as chairing it. Any questions? Seeing none, but not wanting to rush anyone. Senator Evan, we will look forward to next month's report when the time comes. And thank you again for your leadership. We'll now move on to item 5C, action, which is to authorize the executive director to request proposals via the DRPT General Planning Contract to provide technical support to NVTC for analysis related to SJ28 Joint Subcommittee and to execute the associated contract. This is what Mr. DeVetter just mentioned. Do commissioners have questions on this action item?
I would
go
make
ahead.
a motion if you need one.
Sure, go ahead, Senator Evan.
Okay, I would move that we do so as was described.
Sounds good. Is there a second?
Patrick.
Second. Who said the second first?
Dahlia.
Might have been me. Yeah, Patrick.
All right, Ms. Palchek is gonna be our second. Any further discussion? I don't see any. The board, Ms. Kilcrest, over to you for the roll call, folks. Be ready with when your name is called, please.
Chair DeFrenti,
Yes.
Mr. Aguirre,
Aye.
Mr. Elkhorn,
Aye.
Ms. Begley,
Aye.
Mr. Bierman,
Aye.
Mr. Eben. Mr. Eben?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Karantonis?
Aye.
Mr. Krizik?
Aye.
Mr. Lopez, I don't believe has joined. Ms. Palchak?
Aye.
Ms. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Spleem?
Aye.
I believe Mr. Sickles has joined.
Oh, I've been here a long time, but aye.
Mr. Smedberg?
Aye.
Mr. Snyder?
Aye.
Mr. Stork?
Aye.
And Mr. Walkinshaw?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gilchrist, and thank you, Mr. Sickles. I think that qualifies as attendance trash talking for an NVTC meeting. We'll turn it over to the Legislative and Policy Chair, Kanika Gide, to introduce our 2024 Legislative and Policy Agenda. Congratulations again, Mr. Aguirre, on your re-election. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Legislative and Policy Committee and staff have been working on a proposed 2025 legislative and policy agenda for our discussion. Even though there isn't a heavy ask for this General Assembly session, NVTC will be monitoring important legislation that affects transit. Before we dive into the proposed agenda, I would like to ask our Executive Director, Ms. Matthijs, to share the potential impacts to transit from this week's general election. Ms. Matthijs.
Thank you, Mr. Aguirre and Chair. Indeed. So just sort of understanding the lay of the land. While the House, I'm not sure if I've seen yet sort of the House majority, so that's still sort of out there. But obviously, we are going to see changes in administration. The appointees that we see at the U.S. Department of Transportation are going to change over. Senate leadership, of course, is changing over both party. But the other thing is the Senate Banking Committee was this committee of jurisdiction for public transit. And the chair of that subcommittee was Senator Sherrod Brown, and he lost his re-election. So there's going to be a movement and a shift in transit leadership within that committee. So it's just something to sort of watch as that goes through. But for the funding situation, really sort of in the near term, there's a lot of money that goes to WMATA, VRE, PRTC, et cetera, that are formula funds. Those are not going to be modified at all. Those formula funds that go through the Federal Transit Administration are trust fund. They're not subject to annual appropriation. Where we potentially could see changes are in some of those competitive programs, whether they be capital investment grants programs. So for example, that's something that the Route 1 BRT is looking to get into in the future. It could also be some of the rail programs, as well as the low and no emission bus programs. That's not saying they're going away. They're just going to be subject to annual appropriations that may or may not be modified as a result of the election. The other thing that's out there that is not formula funded is the support that goes to WMATA every year that we refer to as the PREA funding, which is $150 million. So again, that's subject to appropriation. That doesn't mean it's going anywhere, going away, but that is something that could be a part of budget caps. So it's just sort of watching this space and sort of seeing how things land up. But on a positive note, sort of on the national level, one of the things that did happen at the elections is a lot of local transit funding referendums were passed. In particular, four jurisdictions in the country, Phoenix, Nashville, Seattle, and Columbus, all had successful initiatives to put in funding for transit, whether they be sales tax or otherwise. So I know I've already been chatting with some of the colleagues, our colleagues that at the staff level working on things like DMV moves, is to learn from some of those campaigns how those went through. And even Miami-Dade did pass. It wasn't a funding, but it was at least sort of a marker towards that. So funding referendums at the local and state level have actually been incredibly successful this year. So I think there's some interesting lessons learned that we may pull from that as we look to doing those sort of things in the future. So that is the update. Obviously, a lot more to watch as we see who is appointed under the new administration and how they play it out, because that can also make a huge difference on sort of both at the US DOT level, but also within the Federal Transit Administration. As somebody who's worked through multiple administrations. It's a lot about that individual that's there to be the administrator. So that's what I have for the update. Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, but those are some of the insights that I could provide.
Great, thank you very much. I don't know if there's questions for Kate on this. I'll send it back to Mr. Aguirre. I think we have a introduction of our new program manager. Over to you, Mr. Aguirre.
That's right. So we're going to turn to our draft legislative agenda, which will be brought back for action at our December meeting. But as our chair just mentioned, I would like to introduce one of NVTC's new program managers, Daniel Nickelbein. And Mr. Nickelbein, we're going to let you give the presentation.
Thank you, Chair Gary, and good to be with you all tonight. So included in your agenda packet is a draft of our 2025 federal and state legislative priorities, and we are seeking your review and feedback. I would note that many of these priorities are the same or similar to last year. And as noted by Chair Gary, we are not planning to pursue a major legislative ask during the upcoming state session, but we'll be setting the groundwork for a robust legislative package in 2026, especially with the SJ 28 working group and DMV moves efforts wrapping up next year. I will now briefly highlight the themes of this year's proposed legislative and policy agenda. Next slide, please. So on the state side, our priorities remain largely similar to last year, but there are a couple of items to note. So our state legislative agenda is centered on advocating for long-term sustainable dedicated funding for WMATA, VRE, and all Northern Virginia transit systems, as we've done in prior years. This year, we're also focused on preserving the additional state aid for WMATA and the operating cap rebaselining that was included in the two-year state budget passed last year. And again, these efforts, we hope will really set the groundwork for a much larger ask in 2026. Next slide, please. So on the federal side, our priorities are proposed to remain largely the same. As Kate mentioned, a lot of uncertainty given Tuesday's election results. We are going to continue an emphasis on maximizing the region's access to federal funding, both formula and competitive for transit. We've also added a new priority referencing the need to address challenges in domestic bus manufacturing that was recently highlighted by an APTA task force report. We've heard from our local transit providers on the importance of working with all of our partners to ensure a sustainable future for domestic bus manufacturing. For reference, programs authorized by the IIJA are set to expire in 2026. So we will remain engaged with our federal delegation as discussions around the next reauthorization start to heat up next year. In terms of next steps for our legislative and policy agenda, we'll take any feedback received from commissioners at this meeting and refine the proposed agenda in advance of the December meeting, where you'll be asked to take action formally approving NVTC's 2025 federal and state legislative agenda. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the thoughtful and succinct presentation, Mr. Nickelbein. Any questions? I don't see hands just yet, but are there any questions? Going once, twice?
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Sure.
suggestion.
Sure.
It's not a question.
Yeah.
If we could have a bullet point that says promoting the efficiency improvements made at WMATA over the last 2 years and include the bus route reform, fare evasion, labor negotiations. And you hear all these things. We never talk about these things. We're accused of being inefficient, but we don't promote the things that we're doing to make us more efficient. And I think that should be on that bullet point page. Actually, I think it should be the first bullet point anytime we hand out anything to anybody about what we're doing to save our metro system. Over.
Thank you, Mr. Sickles, for that, and you certainly have expertise, and you know how those conversations have to start in order for them to work well. So hopefully.
What I know is people don't know about it if we don't tell them.
Yep. Yep. Well said. I see also, so Mr. Nickelman and Ms. Seibert will, if you guys could work through that and maybe engage with Mr. Sickles if you have, thoughts on it or questions. I'll send it over to Mr. Snyder. I think you're on mute. Oh.
Thanks very much. I totally agree with what Mark Sickles said a minute ago. I think that's terribly important. I also didn't see a specific mention of Metro funding, at least in the bullet points. I talked about local transit systems. Clearly, we want to support them, but I'm not sure whether you were including Metro in that. Maybe I missed the bullet points or misread it, but anyway, I think that's a fundamental objective.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No.
Go ahead, Mr. Nickelman, and then we'll go
No,
to
it's
Mr.
just
Snyder.
absolutely. We do discuss the additional state aid in the 26 budget, but we can certainly look to add more language on the Metro funding.
Thank you, Mr. Nickelman. I'll pass to Mr. Snyder. Excuse me, Mr. Smedberg. I can imagine that there's a lot of tectonics on specifically calling out Metro. And so, I do think there could be some benefits, but we'll leave that final negotiation for you all, and perhaps it might be wise to try and just engage with Mr. Snyder. But Mr. Smedberg, go ahead.
Yeah, briefly, Mr. Chair, in addition to what the delegate said, there are a lot of more things that we could also amplify or list as the things that Metro staff and the board have done to improve the organization and bring efficiency. So we can get that to Adam.
Sounds good. Thank you. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to just also third or fourth, supporting Delegate Sickles' recommendation. I think one of the messages on Tuesday is how bad we are at getting a communication, helping people connect dots about what's going on. We're really horrible at it. So I'd like us to do it here and in a lot of other contexts moving forward over the next 4 years. I think we need to help people understand what it is we actually do and why things work when they work, because we need to do that. Thank you. Thanks, Mark, for this, Delegate Sickles, for the suggestion.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey. Broader, good point. So we'll ask that staff follow up on that. I don't see additional hands, and so we'll move on, thinking that those couple of points have been absorbed, and we'll move on and send it back to Ms. Mattice for description of our legislative forum, which is item 5D.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify, the bullets on the slide were short form. The full agenda, which may address some, but not all of the comments, are actually included in the meeting materials, but we'll definitely beef up the storytelling of the improvements at WMATA in there. So I just did want to highlight agendas coming together for our December 13th legislative forum. We do plan on having our general managers. Maybe even some of you speak. It's still in the works. But we did put together a panel of some of the legislators and local officials involved in SJ 28 and DMV moves to do a session that's going to be moderated by Nick Donahue. And so stay tuned for much more of that. But I do believe our RSVPs are well over 100. It is usually just a fantastic event to connect and learn about what's going on in public transit, and also getting a look ahead as to some of the things that we're looking forward to the folks from both SJ 28 and DMV moves are getting involved in. So that's Friday, December 13th. See, I even didn't get that right. December 13th over at the George Mason University Arlington campus, where we've held it at least last year. So we really look forward to seeing all of you there.
Thank you.
Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Mattice. That addresses 5D. We'll go to item 6, which is a report from the chair of the Program Advisory Committee, and that's Chair Dalia Palchik. So would you like to introduce this item, please, Ms. Palchik?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I will keep it brief. The staff are going to give a quick presentation with updates on the BRT7 strategic implementation plan, which will come back to the full commission for action in our December meeting. So to that, let me see if Kate has any introductory remarks before turning it over to staff.
I'm happy to turn it over to Vikram Sinha, who is our program manager in this area.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, commissioners. Good evening. Just really quick, wanted to talk through progress on Envision Route 7 BRT. As you may recollect, I came back in the May or June commission meeting and briefed all of you on our plans to how to accelerate bus improvements and to improve service. The corridor is a huge win for us. Next slide. Seeing a lot of ridership growth. So on the right is a map kind of showing an overlay of the current Metro Bus 28A, soon to be renamed the F20. And the Envision Route 7 corridor is 14 miles, 4 jurisdictions. It's going through a lot of different communities in the region, but we're seeing a lot of great ridership. It's been a very robust growth, kind of a real success story, even post-pandemic. It's seen increase in ridership since before the pandemic. So what we're looking to do is really build on that success, deliver a high frequency, high capacity service. Along with that, we kind of outlined some capital projects that are occurring from our jurisdictions that totals about 518 million that we believe will accelerate and deliver better bus service. Next slide, please. So what you see here in this graphic is kind of this two-pronged approach we're adopting. One is to help to improve the 28A with quicker targeted treatments, and then have the 28A be in operation, and at the same time progress forward with our BRT project, which is a more traditional, longer, more definitive analysis and construction leading to an eventual bus rapid transit system. We are looking at these improvements to be context sensitive as well as multimodal, working with our jurisdictions' plans, as well as supporting local needs and expectations. At the same time, we believe that this will increase the efficiency of bus service and enhance the passenger experience. And lastly, we do believe that better bus service can be achieved in advance of a major capital project. Next slide, please. Along with this strategic implementation plan, we are also advancing the final phase of our mobility analysis. That is phase 4.2. That will go from 7 Corners down towards Alexandria and ending in Marks Center / Southern Towers. While that is the location of our BRT alignment, the 28A will continue to serve Old Town Alexandria. We're looking to identify trends and examine issues around traffic congestion, like really just identifying pain points for the bus. This will, of course, include extensive community conversation. We're writing up the scope of work right now. We understand that there's going to be need for significant translation services, as well as outreach, going to the community at where they are, rather than having the community come to us. This work is funded thanks to a $2 million congressional project funding from Representatives Beyer and Connolly. So really want to thank them for that. And as part of this phase 4.2, we are also going to complete the last piece of the mobility analysis from 4.1, looking into some roadway options in Falls Church that was left over that the staff there and key folks thought we should take a look at. Next steps, we are going to come back in December for the authorization to release the RFP, as well as an endorsement for the strategic implementation plan. The strategic implementation plan has been created with input from jurisdictional staff, and we're looking to hear back from them as well during the next month. But really looking forward to getting that endorsement and then moving ahead with the next phase of the mobility analysis and really having conversations with the community around how to improve bus service. Again, it's a great bus line. A lot of great work coming up ahead. I'm very excited. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Sina. I really appreciate that. I know Chair Palchik, you've shared numerous times how much you care personally, and there are others on the call about this work, and I was struck as you were presenting how this feels like sort of exactly the type of policy and implementation and community engagement work that is really important and moving along well. Are there questions from commissioners on it? All right, not seeing questions. That is not a reflection of, we are grateful for the work, and it's excellent work. So we will look forward to the next steps in December, and we'll continue to appreciate the work you're doing. So we will move on now to the next agenda item, which is Virginia Railway Express. It's item 7. For the record, we are 3 minutes ahead of schedule, not putting any pressure on Mr. Dalton. He is here tonight to give his CEO report, which will be followed by VRE Vice Chair Sarah Bagley introducing the draft VRE legislative agenda, which we brought back to our December meeting for action. So it's a draft. That doesn't mean you should engage as you wish. There are no VRE action items tonight. So often, Mr. Dalton, you share that you will be brief. That's not pressure. That's your call, of course. Do update us, but it's over to you, Mr. Dalton.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and commission members. Yes, I'll be concise. You do have the CEO report in your package. Just as a quick update from a ridership perspective for the month of October, we're at about 6,900 average daily riders, or almost 151,000 over a 22-day service month. Still on-time performance, it's below our target, still hovering in that about 76% on-time performance, still seeing rail congestion, sort of a new twist on the freight rail side, as there's been a lot of freight rail traffic that's been routed the last month or so around the Carolinas. It's actually coming up through this corridor as well. So we're seeing actually an increase in freight train interference, but so hopefully that subsides pretty soon. But that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Appreciate your candor with respect to the challenges. Makes me think that I'm just so eager for continued progress. There was the groundbreaking with respect to Long Bridge, and that's a long way off, but still really appreciate your continued leadership. And we'll see if any commissioners have questions for Rich. Feel free if you have. You don't have to make up a question if you don't. I am not seeing any hands, and so we will move on to the 7B, which, as I mentioned, Miss Bagley will introduce. Over to you, Miss Bagley.
All right. Thank you, Chair DeFerrante. The draft VRE 2025 legislative agenda will serve as guidance for staff and the contracted legislation liaisons during the upcoming legislative session. It also includes federal legislative and regulatory issues that are relevant to transit and commuter rail in the U.S. and VRE specifically. NVTC's legislative and policy agenda aligns with VRE's legislative agenda. There's a copy of the VRE legislative agenda in your meeting materials. For Virginia, I'd highlight one thing. In addition to making sure there is ample funding to support VRE's future plans, we will continue efforts to advance commuter rail exemptions for Virginia's state tax on surplus lines insurance. At the federal level, in addition to securing and holding on to federal funding for rail as authorized in the IIJA, we will urge Congress to make changes to the timeline for implementation of increases to the rail passenger transportation liability cap, as well as monitor activities related to the maintenance and upgrade of Amtrak's First Street Tunnel. This commission's MVTC and PRTC will be asked to approve the VRE legislative agenda at their respective December meetings. That's my summary, Chair DeFerrante.
Thank you. I appreciate it and appreciate the 1.5 pager with respect to the draft. Are there questions for Ms. Bagley? It is, we'll be asked to approve this at the December meetings. And so not seeing any questions and mindful that this is just a draft, we will be ready to move on, but I will not forget to as I complimented and congratulated Mr. Aguirre, congratulations, Ms. Bagley, on your reelection on Tuesday.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I know that you love running. I also know that folks often, like myself, sometimes love being post-election in addition. So we will move on to item 8, which is the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. We have acting DRPT Director Zach Trogdon to give the monthly DRPT report. Mr. Trogdon.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have 2 quick items. One is that our annual grant application period starts December 1st. And so we've been talking with agencies and others about how the funding looks this year. So that goes through February 1st, so that'll open up. The other is that DRPT does have a new director. Governor Youngkin has appointed Tiffany P. Robinson as new DRPT director starting November 10th. And so she's currently a deputy chief of staff in the governor's office, but we look forward to having her come on board, and I know she'll be working with you all very closely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trogdon, for that report and for your leadership during this period. Very much appreciate it. So that covers your report, and we are ready to move on unless there are burning questions. I don't see any. We'll move on to the Executive Director's report. Ms. Mattice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And indeed, just sent out a little bit earlier this evening, will be emailed out to our usual distributions as our newsletter for the month. Lots of great pictures, including some fun events like the Long Bridge groundbreaking and other great things. So obviously, I always appreciate folks checking that out. Lots of good information in there. We've talked a little bit about upcoming meetings, but just to circle back on that, we do have our joint WMATA and Legislative and Policy Committee meetings coming up on the 21st at 6 p.m. and that will be online. Our next commission meeting will be December 5th. And that will be in person back at MVTC's offices. And as I mentioned earlier, that is an opportunity. We do present our work plan and our budget. So a part of that is our annual public hearing for folks to be able to provide comment. That information on how to provide public comment will be posted shortly. And we're actually going to provide several weeks for folks to give comment on how to do that. So that will be posted up on our website. Our legislative forum, I mentioned that on Friday, December 13th. That is joint with us, VRE and PRTC. Definitely want to put that out. You've heard a little bit, some new names. I have to say the names of our new folks we've mentioned here are actually not new at MVTC. They've actually all been promoted from within. And so you may have seen when we talked about Daniel's been working very closely with Ben Owen on commuter choice. He's now going to be taking that portfolio as Ben is doing a much deserved sabbatical. I'd mentioned Alan Fye is now with the Federal Transit Administration. And so Andrew DeVetter is now our Director of Programs and Policy. And we have Adam Hager taking over the portfolio on WMATA, but also helping out in other ways. And finally, Sophie Spiliotopoulos, and I know you've seen her do a lot of data work. We're actually promoting her from Senior Program Analyst up to Program Manager to be in charge of all of our data visualization. If you've seen the talents of her work, that is a wonderful place for her to be. So we're excited to be able to provide promotions within. That's not something we often get to do. So it's wonderful to be able to do that. The financial reports are included in your material. Scott's, of course, always here to answer some questions. And so that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Mattice. Congratulations to Mr. Hager, Ms. Spiliotopoulos, and Mr. Nickelbein, as well as Mr. DeVetter. Each of you are familiar to all commissioners, and just really congratulations for your promotions. I will not claim that without looking I could spell all 4 names, although Mr. Hager's is probably the easiest. But that attempt at levity notwithstanding, truly congratulations. We're thrilled to hear that report, Ms. Mattice. Do commissioners have any questions or comments about the executive director, Ms. Mattice's report, including the financial report, or any other general comments or questions? Open the floor. Folks have thoughts. Hearing none, this virtual meeting may be particularly, given our long week already this week, may be particularly more concise. We now turn to our closed session item, which is sort of perhaps our most significant item of the night in some regards with respect to debate and discussion. For the benefit of the listening public, we do plan to return to open session after this closed session. The YouTube feed will continue with it muted and a screen notice stating that we are in closed session. The meeting will resume live when we return to open session. In case of technical difficulties and the live feed is interrupted, viewers should check our YouTube channel for a new feed. I will go ahead and make this motion and look for a second once I do. This is a motion to move into closed session pursuant to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia. The Northern Virginia Transportation Commission moves to convene a closed session to discuss a personnel matter concerning the executive director's performance evaluation. Is there a second?
Second.
Phew, thank you, Ms. Bagley. If it had failed for lack of a second, that would have been a tough moment for us. We will turn it now to Ms. Gilchrist to call the roll for the motion to move into closed session.
Chair DeFerenti,
Yes.
Mr. Aguirre,
Yes.
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Ms. Bagley,
Yes.
Mr. Bierman,
Aye.
Mr. Eben,
Aye.
Ms. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Karantonis,
Yes.
Mr. Krizik,
Aye.
Ms. Palchik,
Aye.
Ms. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Salim,
Aye.
Mr. Sickles.
Aye.
I need to have your camera on, sir. Thank you.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you. Mr. Smedberg,
Aye.
Mr. Snyder,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
and Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
The motion passes. I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gilchrist. I really appreciate it. So now we will move into closed session. If you could sort of start the process for that, Ms. Mattice, I believe it's Melissa will be helping you with that. And I think do we step into a breakout room? Is that right? Everybody's got
Yes, she
to
will
click
put you
on
into a
join for
breakout
the
room, but
breakout.
I do want to remind all commissioners to keep your cameras on to count for quorum, please.
Thank you. We'll move into closed session and please do keep cameras on. We'll see you in a sec. So Ms. Gilchrist, Rhonda, we're gonna, maybe you can help me with making sure that we have quorum, coming out of closed. I think everybody who was in closed is out, but it's a little hard to, I feel like I'm on like Celebrity, one of those daytime shows. I can't easily get everybody. But when you give me a thumbs up, we'll go ahead and move to, a motion. Let's see.
We have quorum.
Okay, so we're gonna have to do a roll call, and we have to do a roll call to be back we're back in open session. Welcome back to the public and staff. Can I have a motion for the closed session certification? Can someone go ahead with?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
The motion that is that the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge and with no individual member dissenting at the just concluded closed session, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements under the Freedom of Information Act were discussed, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed session was convened were heard, discussed, or considered. Ms. Bagley made the motion. I'll second it. Hearing no further discussion, unless I see a hand, we'll go to a roll call from Ms. Gilchrist.
Okay, I'm gonna do the complete roll call just to make sure we aren't missing anybody or find out who dropped. Chair DeFerenti,
Yes.
Mr. Aguirre,
Aye.
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Ms. Bagley,
Aye.
Mr. Bierman,
Aye.
Mr. Eben. Okay, Ms. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Karantonis,
Yes.
Mr. Krezek,
Yes.
Ms. Palchek,
Aye.
Ms. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Salim,
Aye.
Mr. Sickles,
Aye.
Mr. Smedberg,
Aye.
Mr. Snyder,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
and Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. So I will go ahead and move and ask for a second after I do that we approve an amendment to the executive director's contract in alignment with what was discussed in closed session. Is there a second?
Second. Commissioner Palchik.
Yep, second by Ms. Palchik. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Gilchrist will call the roll for this vote.
Chair DeFerenti,
Yes.
Mr. Aguirre,
Aye.
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Ms. Bagley,
Aye.
Mr. Bierman,
Aye.
Ms. Garvey,
Yes.
Mr. Karantonis,
Aye.
Mr. Krezek,
Aye.
Ms. Palchek,
Aye.
Ms. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Salim,
Aye.
Mr. Sickles,
Aye.
Mr. Smedberg,
Aye.
Mr. Snyder,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
and Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Gilchrist. Thank you, colleagues, for tolerating the roll call. It's a cost of doing business when we're virtual, and I hope everyone was in alignment as to being virtual. Without objection, we are adjourned until December 5th, as you see on your screen. Thanks, everybody, for bearing with me and bearing with us.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Have a good
Good night, everybody.
Right.